Hey everybody, today we're going to solve the RLE Iterator problem on LeetCode. We need to write an iterator that iterates through a run length encoded sequence. The iterator is initialized by giving an array of integers, and A represents the run length encoding of some sequence, which means for even I, A of I tells us the number of times that A of I plus 1 is repeated. It takes one function in n, which exhausts the next n elements in the sequence, and returns the last element exhausted in this way. No such element, return -1. So this doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you look at the explanation here. So here's what we're given. It gets initialized with this array here, and what that means is in the sequence there are 3 8s. Okay, so there are 3 8s, there are 0 9s, and there are 2 5s in the sequence. So the sequence looks like this. Okay. And then they call next 4 times. So they call next of 2. Okay, so that means take up the first 2 elements. So 2 of the 8s are used up, and there's still an 8 left. So it returns an 8. It returns this last 8 here. Next one uses up the last 8. So this 8 is used up and returned. Next, now the sequence is just 5, 5. Next one will use up the first 5. Now the sequence is just a 5. And then next 2 will return -1 because it will use up this 5, and then it will get to the end of the array and there's nothing there, and it will return -1. So we can do this just doing a simple simulation of the process. Okay. What we'll do is we will store this initial value that we're given, this initial array, and a pointer, and the pointer will begin here at 3. Okay, and what we'll do is each time we have next called with an integer n, we will loop while n is greater than 0. And basically we'll decrement this value, and each time we hit 0 and n still not 0, then we go to the next value 2 blocks forward. Okay, and then we'll just keep moving along in that way. So the constructor is real easy. We just store the array that we're given, and we start our pointer at 0 at the first count of how many elements there are. And then when we're given the next event, okay, this is what does the work. Well, n is greater than 0, okay, that means that n that we're given do not use up all the elements it's supposed to use up. So n is greater than 0, and pointer is less than sequence element. So we're now at the end of the array. We still have elements to use, we still have elements to use. So right here we just find out the current available, which is sort of that represents the number of elements that we have of the value pointer plus 1. That's the number that we have left. Okay. And what we do here is we update the number of that value that we have left by checking. Well, if n is greater than the number of those values that we have, then we set it to 0, because that means that n will use up all of those elements. Else, we just set it to the number that we have minus n. Okay, we use up n elements of those. And then we update n. If n is greater than the number of those elements that we have, then we set it to n minus the current available. N will still be greater than 0. We basically use up all those elements. So n minus current available represents exhausting that number of elements. If it's not, then it's 0, because there are more elements than n. We exhaust the n elements, and then n is 0. And then we update the pointer. If n is 0, meaning we don't have to go find more elements to exhaust. We've exhausted all the elements we've needed, then we just leave it as pointer. If n is not 0, then that means we have exhausted all the elements that we currently have, and we need to go to the next element, which is the count of the next element is located at pointer plus 2. The value of the next element is located at pointer plus 3. And then down here at the end, what we'll return, well, if the pointer is less than sequence.length, then that means that we still have valid elements left. We will return sequence of pointer plus 1, because the last element that was exhausted, its value is stored at pointer plus 1. Else we return -1, pointer is greater than sequence length, and we have no elements left. Alright, cool. So it works. Nothing too difficult, just a simple simulation. And if you don't understand this notation, these are all ternary statements. It's a shorthand way of writing an if-else, just a way to make your code nice and clean.